54%. That's the share of Americans who report drinking alcohol, according to Gallup, the lowest figure on record. Easy headline, America's sobering up. Except that number masks something far more violent. In March 2025, Ontario's Liquor Control Board, the LCBO, didn't raise prices on American spirits. It didn't add a surcharge. It pulled every single American alcohol product from its shelves, its website, and its wholesale catalog. Over 3,600 products from 35 U.S. states. Gone. A legal market worth $965 million a year. Erased by administrative order. Ontario wasn't alone. Province after province followed. This is what I call the Exclusion Doctrine. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll show you how this mechanism permanently rewired Canada's domestic industry and why the damage is irreversible. Even if every tariff disappears tomorrow. Most trade wars operate on friction. The U.S. levies a 25% tariff. Prices rise, margins shrink. Exporters absorb the hit or pass it on, and the market adjusts painfully, but within the rules of open competition. You can still fight, you can discount, you can negotiate. The Exclusion Doctrine operates on a different axis entirely. In the majority of Canadian provinces, alcohol flows through a single government-run monopoly. The LCBO in Ontario, the SAQ in Quebec, the BCLDB in British Columbia. These agencies don't just retail liquor, they control what gets purchased, what reaches the shelf, and what the consumer is even allowed to buy. Absolute gatekeeping over an entire product category. So when a provincial premier signs one order, there is no workaround. No discount strategy, no alternative distributor. The channel itself ceases to exist. Lawson Whiting, CEO of Brown-Forman, parent company of Jack Daniels, put it plainly, pulling U.S. liquor off Canadian shelves, he told reporters, was worse than a tariff. A tariff raises your costs. A ban eliminates your revenue at the source. You don't get to compete anymore. You don't even get to lose money trying. The data confirms the carnage. U.S. spirits exports to Canada collapsed more than 70% in 2025. Total alcohol exports cratered to just $89 million, a 63% freefall, according to the Discus American Spirits Exports Report. And the shockwave extended beyond liquor. Overall, U.S. goods exports to Canada dropped to $336.5 billion that year, down nearly 4%, with the alcohol wipeout standing as one of the most visible and politically humiliating line items in that decline. Think about the geometry of power. One administrative directive, no legislative debate, no tariff negotiation, $1 billion trade corridor, flatlined. That is the Exclusion Doctrine, monopoly power wielded as sovereign leverage. But here's what almost no one is tracking yet. When you vaporize $1 billion worth of shelf space overnight, that space doesn't sit empty. Someone fills it. And whoever steps in starts building supply chains, brand loyalty, and production capacity that didn't exist 12 months ago. The answer landed fastest in Oakville, Ontario. Within weeks of the delisting, provincial governments across Canada didn't just remove American bottles, they leaned into the vacuum. Buy Canadian campaigns rolled out on LCBO shelves in liquor store windows from Vancouver to Halifax. The message was simple. Your country needs you to drink local. In any normal market, that kind of nationalist branding is background noise. People buy what they like. But this wasn't a normal market. The competitors weren't underperforming. They were physically gone. 3,600 American products evaporated. And suddenly, every Canadian distillery, winery, and brewery was staring at empty shelf space with their name on it. Nobody sees that moment faster than Craig Peters. Peters runs Maverick Distillery, a mid-sized operation in Oakville. The kind of place that 12 months earlier was fighting for inches of shelf space against Jack Daniels and Maker's Mark. When the bourbon supply line went dark overnight, Peters didn't wait for a strategy meeting. He looked at what he already had. Canadian-based whiskey stock sitting in his warehouse, and started blending. a hybrid Canadian whiskey specifically engineered to hit the flavor profile that bourbon drinkers were suddenly missing. Smoother than a traditional rye, a touch of caramel sweetness built entirely from inventory he already owned. The product hit LCBO shelves within weeks, and then the numbers started coming in. Maverick's vodka sales doubled, 100% increase. Their whiskey, 300%, not projected, not annualized, actual 2020 sales. Peters told CTV News he had to emergency hire 25 production workers, then run them on midnight shifts, bottling lines recalibrated and humming through the small hours, just to keep product moving into the LCBO pipeline. 25 new hires at a single mid-sized distillery in suburban Ontario, working around the clock because geopolitics handed them a demand curve no business plan could have predicted. That's not organic growth. That's a geopolitical air pocket turning into a launch pad. Maverick wasn't an outlier. They were just the fastest. The LCBO's own year-end report tells the broader story. Ontario VQA wine sales. The province's quality certified local wines jumped 56% across the board in 2025. Red VQA surged 66%. White, 54%. It wasn't just wine. Ontario made beer climb 22%. Ready-to-drink products, 21%. Every single category of locally produced alcohol posted double-digit growth in a single calendar year. This wasn't a market phenomenon. It was an administrative one. No government wrote checks to these producers. No subsidy program. No tax incentive. What happened was simpler and, frankly, more powerful. The competition was legislated out of existence. Shelves stripped bare by mandate, then restocked with whatever was Canadian and ready to ship. Every local producer got handed a monopoly they never had to earn. That's the mechanism worth understanding. Tariffs make imports expensive. The Exclusion Doctrine makes them invisible. And when your competitor isn't priced out but erased from every retail listing in the province, you don't need a marketing budget. You need a bottling line. By late 2025, the narrative in Canada was clean and satisfying. American tariffs backfired. Canadian producers thrived. The shelves were full again, this time with homegrown labels. Buy Canadian worked. Except there's a number buried deep in the supply chain data that nobody was putting on camera. A number that turns this entire victory lap into something far more complicated. Because while Canadian distillers were celebrating record sales on the front end, the raw ingredients flowing into their production lines were quietly telling a very different story. 70. That's the number nobody was putting on camera. In a single year of trade friction, more than 70 independent Canadian breweries shut their doors permanently. The Canadian Craft Brewers Association reported it in February 2025. $170 million in lost output, an $83 million reduction in GDP contribution, $18 million less in tax revenue, 875 supply chain jobs erased. So, let me reframe what just happened. You watched Maverick Distillery triple its sales. You watched VQA wines climb 56%. Those numbers were real. They were also the front of the house. The back of the house was on fire. Here's the mechanism. Canada and the United States don't just trade finished bottles across the border. Their upstream production chains are deeply interlocked. Canadian craft brewers, especially the small independents, the ones expected to benefit most, depend heavily on American-sourced inputs. Aluminum cans, high-grade stainless steel for brewing equipment, specialty malts that simply aren't grown domestically at scale. When retaliatory tariffs hit, they didn't just block American whiskey from LCBO shelves. They inflated the cost of every raw material flowing into Canadian production lines. The same policy wall that created a sales bonanza on the front end quietly detonated a cost crisis on the back end. And this is where the math turns cruel. Picture a small craft brewery in Ontario. Before the tariffs, you're competing against dozens of American bourbon labels for shelf space. Margins are thin, your costs are predictable. Then the Exclusion Doctrine kicks in. Those competitors vanish overnight. Your sales double, maybe triple. You're hiring, you're expanding. Except your aluminum cans now cost 20 to 30% more. Your stainless steel replacement parts. Same story. That specialty Belgian malt you import through a US distributor, landed costs just jump by a quarter. Your revenue line is climbing. Your cost line is climbing faster. Economists call this the infant industry trap, a protected domestic sector that grows its top line while margins collapse underneath. BNN Bloomberg and Global Data both documented this exact pattern across the Canadian brewing sector through 2026. Massive consolidation driven by fatal margin compression, even as consumer demand surged. 70 breweries didn't close because nobody wanted their beer. They closed because every pint they sold was bleeding money. Sales up, profits gone. The more they produced, the faster they bled out. The political appeal of a closed border strategy is entirely rational on its face. A foreign government slaps 25% tariffs on your exports. The instinct to retaliate, rally behind domestic producers, and declare a clean win follows a perfectly logical calculus. But modern production chains don't respect national boundaries the way retail shelves do. The brewing sector's dependence on American aluminum and steel was only the first order cost. Second order damage radiated through the entire support ecosystem. Freight carriers that specialized in cross-border malt and packaging shipments saw volumes collapse as their brewery clients folded. Equipment maintenance firms servicing brewing lines with American-made replacement parts faced the same tariff markup and passed it through. Regional cold chain logistics operators lost accounts one closure at a time. Each shuttered brewery didn't just remove a single producer. It removed a node from a local network of freight, service, and distribution and businesses that had taken years to assemble. The sovereignty premium, the hidden cost of asserting economic independence inside a deeply integrated continental supply chain, didn't land on the headline winners. It landed on the smallest, newest, most vulnerable producers and the entire local infrastructure orbiting them. This is the structural reality that the unilateral victory thesis must eventually confront. In a connected economy, every gain on one side of the ledger opens a wound on the other. The wound doesn't announce itself. It bleeds quietly in shuttered breweries, in canceled freight contracts, in laid-off maintenance crews, until the industry data surfaces months later and forces a recalculation of what winning actually cost. Now, knowing the front-end victory was already compromised from within, the real question shifts. What does this do to Canada's actual negotiating position? Because the Americans were watching these numbers too. The answer to that question starts in a place no trade negotiator would think to look. Inside the shopping carts of 38 million Canadians. Everything we've covered so far, the delisting, the supply chain, hemorrhaging, the 70 shuttered breweries, operates on the plane of physical supply and demand, tangible, measurable, and theoretically reversible. But here's where the analysis must leave the economics textbook and enter the neuroscience lab. Because after 12 continuous months of American alcohol vanishing from every provincial shelf, this trade disruption has crossed a threshold that no policy paper can address. It has penetrated the consumer's subconscious. Pause the macroeconomic math for a moment. We instinctively treat tariffs like temporary bad weather, assuming buyers snap back the instant skies clear. That assumption is a fatal miscalculation. Watch what a 12-month forced drought actually does to a buyer's neurological baseline. The provincial bans physically removed every American whiskey, bourbon, and craft beer from the shelf. Canadian consumers who preferred those products had zero choice. They grabbed whatever local option was available, often reluctantly, sometimes resentfully, but they kept grabbing it, week after week, month after month. And this is where a deeper mechanism overrides conscious choice. A principal behavioral economists call the Mere exposure effect. The more frequently you encounter something, the more you prefer it. Your brain stops flagging it as unfamiliar and starts coding it as trusted. This has nothing to do with willpower or patriotism. It's raw neurological rewiring through sheer repetition. By month 7 or 8, that reluctant substitution had quietly metamorphosed into genuine preference. The local IPA that tasted fine, I guess, in March tasted like home by November. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford handed this process all the runway it needed, declaring in late August 2025 that American products stay off shelves until a deal is struck. That statement functioned as a biological countdown timer, giving those new neural pathways enough repetitions to harden into permanence. The data confirms exactly this trajectory. A global data consumer survey from Q1 2025 found that 85% of Canadian boomers and 71% of Gen X were explicitly reconsidering American-made alcohol, not temporarily avoiding it, permanently replacing it. That word, reconsidering, CIFERA is doing enormous analytical work. It marks the cognitive jump from I'm boycotting out of principle to I genuinely prefer what I have now. And then comes the shift that should keep American trade negotiators staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. The preference calcifies into identity. Buy Canadian migrates from protest slogan to personal value. The USTR's own 2026 National Trade Estimate report acknowledged this explicitly, flagging Canada's provincial delisting policies and the culturally entrenched Buy Canadian mindset as structural market access barriers. Their word, structural. The United States Trade Representative told Congress in writing, this damage has outlived the retaliation that caused it. So here is the devastating arithmetic. The full chain runs, forced physical cutoff, then reluctant trial, then neurological adaptation, then permanent local preference, then complete psychological decoupling. Every single link in that chain is biological, and biology does not negotiate, which means it genuinely does not matter whether Ottawa and Washington shake hands tomorrow and zero out every tariff on the books. It does not matter if Ontario reverses every delisting order by Friday afternoon. The billion-dollar market share American alcohol companies lost isn't sitting in some policy vault waiting to be unlocked. It evaporated into the synapses of millions of consumers who now reach for the Canadian shelf without conscious thought. An administrative order is fragile. A signature creates it. A signature erases it. A habit trained over 12 unbroken months. That demands another 12 months of counter-conditioning, and only if the consumer actually wants to change back. The data says they don't. But what about yours specifically? Over the past year, have you found a local brand you genuinely plan to stick with even after the original American labels return to the shelf? Drop it in the comments. I want to know if the habit has locked in for you too. Now, if you're an American trade strategist absorbing these numbers, you've just confronted a brutal reality. The alcohol market is gone permanently. And when a country realizes it has permanently lost one battlefield, it does not accept the loss quietly. It starts hunting for a bigger hostage, something Canada cannot simply replace with a local alternative, something with no domestic substitute at any price. And there is exactly one asset that fits that description: Canadian crude oil. More than 90% of every barrel Canada pumps crosses the American border. That number comes directly from the Canada Energy Regulator's February 2025 market snapshot. And the reason it stays at 90% has nothing to do with preference. It's physics, pipeline infrastructure. Canada built its entire export corridor pointing in one direction, south. There are no major operational pipelines running east to Tidewater for Asian buyers. No western super corridor feeding Pacific tankers at scale. The oil moves to American refineries, or it sits in the ground. For a U.S. trade negotiator absorbing the permanent collapse of the alcohol market, this is the ultimate leverage point. You've lost $1 billion consumer goods battlefield to an irreversible psychological shift. You need a concession before the 2026 CUSMA review hits the table. And right there, exposed, immovable, structurally captive, sits Canada's single largest export commodity, bound to exactly one customer by steel in the ground. This is where the battlefield escalates from retail shelves to sovereign infrastructure. The logic is mathematically clean. Because the alcohol market cannot be recovered, the buying patterns, the supply chains, the consumer habits have all permanently rewired. American negotiators have zero incentive to offer concessions on beverages. Instead, they will redirect pressure toward the one domain where Canada holds no cards: energy export access. If Canada wants to maintain its defiant posture on alcohol protectionism, the United States will simply raise the price of that defiance somewhere Canada cannot absorb it. And there is a historical blueprint for exactly this kind of coercion. Guitane de Silva, former CEO of the Canada Energy Regulator, flagged it in a CBC News analysis. Under the original Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, there existed something called the Energy Proportionality Clause. What it mandated was extraordinary. Canada was legally required to maintain a consistent share of its oil and gas exports to the United States regardless of domestic conditions. Supply crunch at home doesn't matter. Heating season shortfall, irrelevant. The contractual ratio flows south. That clause was dropped when CUSMA replaced NAFTA in 2020, but De Silva's warning is precise. This binding mechanism is likely to resurface in the 2023 CUSMA negotiations as Washington's primary extraction tool. Canada pulled American whiskey and bourbon from every retail shelf in the country to defend its domestic market. That act of economic self-determination succeeded beyond anyone's forecast. Local breweries, distilleries, and cideries filled the vacuum permanently. Domestic brand loyalty hardened into fact. The Exclusion Doctrine worked completely, irreversibly, but the cost of that success may now be denominated in an entirely different currency. Because what the 2026 negotiating table could demand looks like this: restore full American alcohol market access, dismantle every shelf protection you've built, or we reinstate proportionality on your crude. Lock your energy exports to our contractual terms. Convert your national pipeline network into a binding obligation to American refineries, regardless of what your own provinces need. That is the trade. A micro-industry victory, craft beer, artisanal gin, provincial wine, weighed against macro sovereignty over the resource that underwrites your federal budget, your provincial transfers, your national solvency. And this is the question that should follow every policymaker in Ottawa out of the room tonight. When a trade fight starts reshaping entire industries, when supply chains rewire, when new buying patterns permanently set, when new domestic ecosystems take root in the vacuum that coercion created, does reversing the original decision actually restore balance? Or does it simply produce a completely new landscape where the old rules no longer apply and the price of every future negotiation has been permanently, irreversibly reset?